This is Brother Ron, and welcome to We All Be News Radio and TV, the news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Judge, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, excellent. We All Be is honored to have on, once again, the one and only, truly beyond category, human extraordinary brother, Judge Joe Brown. It's going to bring us the lowdown of what's going on, not only in your town, but around the globe. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm fine, young man. I'm fine.
Yeah, I just heard you just came from Hawaii. I guess you was taking a well-needed vacation, but also did you do any work uncovering Obama's birth certificate while you was down there?
They didn't seem to have it on file.
Okay. Excellent. But tell us something about Hawaii that a lot of us are not familiar with as Americans. I know it's the 50th state, I
That
believe.
birth gate thing.
Okay.
See, the Constitution itself sets forth qualifications to be a citizen. They set forth also separately qualifications to be president.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get to be president just by being citizen. You have to be a natural citizen. And by that, there are some differences between what qualifies you as a citizen who has not been naturalized. That sounds confusing. Naturalized means that you come in from a foreign country, you're a foreign citizen, and you go through the procedures that are set up by Congress to be made a U.S. citizen. Okay, that's one thing. The next thing is to be a U.S. citizen. If your mother is a U.S. citizen, it does not make you were born, you are a U.S. citizen. Prime Minister Winston Churchill of England, the famous one, was a U.S. citizen, though he renounced it so he could become prime minister and an English noble. His father was an English nobleman and his mother was an American heiress.
Wow.
That whole thing about Obamagate comes in with this. You can be a U.S. citizen, but if you're to be president, you have to be born in the continental United States, a territory, protectorate, consulate, embassy, military, naval base. Now, we have one of the front-running Republicans, Cruz, is born in Canada. Constitution clearly says he's ineligible to be president, even though he said it, the press hasn't talked about it. That's what the thing was with Obama. Obama's mother was born in Kansas. She was an American citizen. His mama made him a citizen anywhere he was born in the world. But unless he was born in a protectorate, territory, or state, or consulate, or embassy, military, or naval base, he wasn't eligible to be president. So that's why this whole big thing about was he in fact born in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. Now, it's interesting, and I found it strange that he'd been president almost 2 years before they managed to come up with a birth certificate. Hell, just think about getting a passport or anything else. You need a birth certificate, so you just go order it from the Department of Vital Records in the state that you were born in, and they'll send you one in a week. Mm-hmm. That's what all the mess was about. Well, buddy, why did it take you 2 years to come up with one that was suspect? You know, so that's the whole thing. But I don't know why the news hasn't picked up on that. Well, it's ignorance, really. Very few people including judges, have actually read the Constitution. Another little thing about it, for example, the International War on Terror. There is no such allowance under the Constitution. That's an impossible situation. You can't have a war declared on an idea. But Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says, in so many words, it's the obligation of the naval forces of the U.S. to pursue, eradicate, and suppress piracy wherever found in the world. Later on in the Constitution itself, it says, the Constitution, such laws promulgated by Congress to effectuate the Constitution, and such treaties as have been ratified by the Senate are part of the supreme law of the land. Well, there are a number of treaties ratified by the Senate that declare what? Hijacking piracy. They had thought of flying in an aircraft 240 years ago when the Constitution was ratified, but by its pollution, you get into the balance. So on 911, 4 airplanes got hijacked. That's piracy. You may pursue and suppress piracy wherever found in the world. Not may, but you shall. That's an obligation of the naval forces. That's how the Marine Corps got part of their hymn from the halls of Montezuma, which was the Mexican-American War in 1848. You also have to the shores of Tripoli, which was in the early part of the 19th century. The Navy and the Marines suppressed the Barbary pirates down in Tripoli. So that is a duty, and that's why you have the Navy off of the eastern coast of Africa now, along with the English and the French navies suppressing piracy, because ever since ancient Rome, it has been a tradition and obligation of a major nation state to suppress piracy. So as we respect also Article 1, Section 8, we enforce the law of nations, which is the exact language in the Constitution. So it's a shall thing. It's not maybe or you can or you might. You shall. Get rid of piracy and enforce the law of nations. So since you've got aircraft piracy, that means you go after Al-Qaeda. Now, instead of having all this nonsense that you got from that smirking idiot Bush, pirates, we're fighting fighting terrorism, the International War on Terror is something where we have to fight terrorism. He says it 8 times in the sentence. That smirking idiot, forget that. And the press ran with it stupidly instead of realizing what was supposed to be said, when the correct terminology is this is suppression of piracy. Everybody understands yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum needs to be cut out. So we've got a lot of misleading ignorance that's been floating around and perpetrated. Like, for example, Lee Harvey, who died, it was Gunny. He was in a movie called Full Metal Jacket and came up with the term, all right, lock and load. Well, traditionally, the term in the U.S. military was not lock and load. It was load and lock. Because America put in a safety feature to his battle rifles. It's been in there for 100 years, which is when the hammer's not cocked or the action is not cocked, you can't put the safety on. So what happens is you have to do this. You're in base camp and you get ready to move out. Your sergeant says, all right, gentlemen, load them up. You put a magazine in or you put the cartridge in. Not the cartridge, you load the magazine up. All right, you can't put the safety on, so until you get outside of the perimeter, he says, okay, load them and lock them. It means you pull the rod operating handle back, let it go, chamber around, and put the safety on. In other words, load it and lock. But the movie thing is lock and load. And you keep hearing lock and load, lock and load. That's not the official term.
Wow.
That's just ignorance that got spread through a movie.
So people don't read, like you said, a lot of the judge and lawmakers don't know about the Constitution. I mean, from my understanding, the founding fathers would laugh at this concept of the war on terror versus they actually had war with pirates.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, see, and the thing about piracy, there is no discretion. You shall pursue, eradicate, and suppress piracy.
But did we also make deals with pirates, like Thomas Jefferson? Did they make deals? Like we said, we don't deal with terrorists, right?
But what happened was, okay, let's get real. We didn't have a Navy. We didn't have an Army after the Revolution. And when we got free of England, England says, okay, now you have some consequences. You're a part of the British Empire, with these pirates. So what happens is we didn't have a Navy, so what are you going to do? You've been talking smack, so all you can do is play bribery. So one of the first things they did was created a new Navy. To deal with it. One of the first ships they built, the Constitution, which was a super frigate, is still in commission with the U.S. Navy. It's in Boston Harbor.
You mean the actual ship, the original ship
Baltimore. Is still? Yeah, it is the oldest ship in the U.S. Navy. It's still in active commission. It is not a museum ship. It's in Baltimore, Maryland.
It's 200 plus years old, right?
240, almost 230.
See, now you get into conspiracy, Judge, because a lot of black folks don't believe that slavery actually happened or that we came from Africa because they say, well, where are the slave ships? If you got a 200 plus year old ship still around, where are the slave ships that's still around?
Well, they rot. They're made out of wood. You put wood and water with a lot of marine parasites infesting it, they rot. But you see, the Constitution was made out of very strong American oak. So strong it got the nickname Old Ironsides because cannonballs would bounce off.
Oh, interesting.
And it had copper sheathing on the bottom of the hull to keep the marine fouling off. And quite frankly, it's a special ship. It was undefeated, so that, the new nation said, well, we got something to show, so let's front it off. This is our bling. So it becomes part of Britain's got crown jewels. We've got the Constitution. They, by the way, have one too, HMS Victory. That was Lord Horatio Nelson's of the oceans for 100 years.
Can you repeat that part again, Judge? It kind of broke up a little bit. Like you said, Lord Horatio.
Yeah, Lord Horatio Nelson.
Nelson, okay.
Flagship is known as the Victory. It's on display in England. It was the ship when the English won Trafalgar against the Spanish and French navies combined. So it gave England mastery of the world's oceans for 100 years.
So what was the name of this ship? What was the name of it?
Victory.
Victory, and it's still around.
Yep.
Wow.
It becomes a national treasure. Every, Congress passed an act that says forever and a day type thing, this ship will be maintained in good condition. And it's still in commission. So they take it out periodically. And when they train senior petty officers in the Navy, they have to do the training on board the Constitution.
Wow. Now that's fascinating.
They have 4 other ships like that. They are by special act of Congress forever to be maintained in a semi-operable condition. Those are the Iowa class battleships. That's the Iowa, the New Jersey, the Wisconsin, and the Missouri.
Yes,
So
sir.
they become sort of national treasures.
Now, how many Americans are aware of what you just said about the Constitution, you think? I mean, what's the percentage-wise of Americans who are aware?
Very few. And the shame of it is the Constitution is only about 12 pages, 10, 12 pages long. It's not a complicated document. You can get them as little booklets or pamphlets. And most of that doesn't work anymore because it was just some stuff in there that was one time only to set the country up, and it stopped working at the beginning of the 19th century.
So people still use the Second Amendment, though.
Of course, that's an amendment. That's part of it, but it's not a long paragraph. It just says the right of the people to be armed shall not be. Well, it's a little longer, but basically it says all it's got to say in a couple of sentences, 2 or 3. I don't think it's 3 sentences.
Okay.
I may be wrong. These amendments are not long because, you see, you don't want to be too specific because that means that you are too exclusive in terms of what you cover. So if you want the law, the amendment to be inclusive, you carefully craft it so it sets the principles. And then you come up with laws to effectuate it. And there's another thing, too. You get these bozos on the right wing talking about the anathema of judges making law.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Sixth Amendment says no matter tried upon the common law before a jury shall be heard upon appeal except upon application of the common law. Well, the Constitution got ratified in 1789,
Mm-hmm.
and in 1791, the Bill of Rights, first 10 amendments were passed. So obviously, what's the question? What is the common law? Well, the very first case, basically, the U.S. Supreme Court determined what the common law was. And it's interesting. It said, we find that the common law is as defined by the English House of Lords in 1661. And they enumerated what's in the common law. Now, this is the caveat about it that most people don't get it. They said, first off, all law in the United States is the common law until it becomes superseded by statutory regulation, ordinance, or what did I say? A regulation, ordinance, or statute.
Okay.
It is the common law until a legislative body comes up with an act, okay, that supersedes it.
Mm-hmm.
So all law in the United States is common law. The common law is judge-made law. So in other words, you hear all these right-wingers talking about the anathema of judges making law. Well, the very first case that the U.S. Supreme Court came up with was all law in America is judge-made until a legislative body decides to intervene. And then they say the common law is, quote, that body of judge-made law based on tradition, precedent, and the evolving conditions of society, unquote. So in other words, it evolves as society evolves. not stagnant. But you hear so many right-wing types who never read the Constitution who want to talk about it stagnant, or they've never read the case law.
I mean, these guys.
This fool Bork that was nominated before Clarence Thomas, but got turned down when he used to talk about the ordained from our judge-made law. He came in to give a lecture, so me and some other lawyers ambushed him and just printed up copies of that, Xerox copies of that first case and highlighted the damn thing. And they said, okay, how do you explain that? Oh, well, he got so flustered he walked off the stage.
So you got to hand it, but you got to hand it to the founding fathers, so-called founding fathers. They were flawed, but they were brilliant legal scholars, right? I mean, they knew their law. They knew what came before.
There was another thing, too. They were revolutionaries. See, most people don't get it, but the U.S. was the first revolutionary government seen in the world. Where it rebelled against a parent and didn't set up an alternative monarchy or something. It set up a constitutional government. So we are the first revolution. We invented the term guerrilla warfare. So what we sit up and fight now is something that we put in motion 250 years ago.
Wow.
We were the first. So a lot of people don't get that. This whole thing about slavery, it's written into the Constitution, but I think it says in there shall be no more slaves imported into the U.S. after 1806. All right? Now, the thing about it, too, is part of the constitutional system of the U.S. government includes the Declaration of Independence, which most people, when they read it, think it's some document written up by some third world communist entity. They don't even recognize it for what it is. And by the way, if black folk want to get some wisdom, they ought to read the Declaration of Independence and see that this country was founded on when in the course of human events it becomes basically intolerable for people to continue under certain circumstances. They are expected to rebel.
That's brilliant.
So we get to being, we got to go pray about it. So it's interesting that the people that taught us this religion don't even go there.
I think Thomas Jefferson even wrote his own Bible, right? He wrote a Bible that he authored, Thomas Jefferson.
Well, what he did is he took a razor.
Okay.
And he took several identical Bibles and he went through and he cut passages out and pasted them in a blank to make up the Bible. He took what he thought was the garbage out and put stuff that he thought was universally wise in.
So I think about the founding fathers. One that I really respected was Thomas Paine. I think a lot of them knew that slavery could not last forever. But the way they wrote the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, like you just said, in the course of human events, they knew that it was a future where black folks would have to be free. But I think Thomas Paine was more honest among them. And that's why he's not really remembered. There's no statues, streets, or schools, or anything named after Thomas Paine in America, I believe.
Well, there's also something else, too. The passage of time aids ignorance.
Yeah.
When these people wrote the Constitution,
Judge, you're breaking up. Okay. Hello?
Our parents, there had been the 100 Years' War, which was Europe was in a century-long war behind religion, which was just absolutely ridiculous. That's why they have that thing in there about religious tolerance, and there is to be no official state religion because they saw the evil of it. And then we've got people going around pompously now with no clue, no understanding of history, wanting to go undo what was done to remedy a great evil. All right. Next thing is this. It wasn't until 1878 that Irish were declared white by a joint act of Congress. They were considered non-white up until that point.
Just the Irish, right?
Irish.
Okay.
Native Americans were considered non-white. But interestingly enough, they had, even though they got put on that Trail of Tears, they had what they call the civilized nations, Indian nations, which is Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole Indians.
Okay.
They had their own alphabets and language, written language patterns, all right? The Cherokee owned slaves in the South, and they usually got hired to be the super slave catchers because they could get through the wilderness. They were integrated into Southern Army units during the Civil War. They were integrated into American Union Army units during the Civil War. But we had segregated black units, but not where the blacks were integrated in. The Hispanics were integrated into the normal white Union Army units and the Confederate Army units. You see, there's something about us that excludes us. Now, you got this thing when we talk about Great Britain in 410 AD, when the Roman legions are withdrawn from England, Britain, the situation is that the last 3 legions that were withdrawn had been recruited from parts of the Roman Empire that were predominantly African. Excuse me. So those legionnaires had been breeding with local English women for going on 90 years. So England has a big chunk of African genes dumped into it from that time period. You fast forward to the Renaissance and that time period where you started having the Protestant Reformation. You had, end of the 15th century, you had Ferdinand and Isabella representing the houses of Seville and Savoy, I think it is, in Spain, conquering what used to be known as Al-Andalus. That was old Spain, which was run by the Muslims. It had been a friendly place to Islam and to Jews. But when the Catholics took it over, they gave the Jews and the followers of Islam the opportunity to convert to Catholicism or leave. So a lot of them converted. But within 10, 15 years, you got that freak fool sadist, Torquemada, who comes into power in the Catholic Church and starts having an inquisition to see if the former Muslims and Jews had reverted or were they still good Catholics. So right now, if you go to Spain, they always, as a tradition now, you get served a ham dish. And they've got all kinds of different ways of preparing ham. And what that was about was to see if somebody was still a good Catholic, they could eat the ham, or had they reverted to practicing Islam or Judaism, in which case they wouldn't want to eat it, so they got seized and done in. But a lot of people, especially Muslims, who the Moors you hear about, Moorish architecture in Spain, they had become mercenaries for the Spanish armies. Now, the Spanish armies had occupied a lot of the lowlands. That's like Belgium, Holland, and so forth. So when Torquemada started having that Inquisition, guess who decided that, hey, I'm not going back to Spain and getting caught up in all of that? And they wound up staying in the lowlands. So there is all this African genetic material through the Moors that are now, that's now getting spread around in the lowlands.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this Catholic Protestant thing going on in England. So you get these people coming over from the lowlands into Ireland, and they dumped a lot of African genes in Ireland. Meanwhile, England has, just like the Americas, begun to acquire African slaves. See, nobody else made slaves as good as Africans did because nobody else would put up with it. They'd kill themselves, go run off or kill the master or get on a boat and go elsewhere. We put up with it. See, they couldn't use Native Americans because they'd just die or kill themselves. They couldn't use certain tribes of Africans because they would die or kill themselves or refuse to be surrender. So you didn't get slaves out of them. But there were certain elements in the African makeup that apparently went along pretty well with being made slaves of. So they would accept it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyway, what happens is you've got this African genetic input into Ireland. And by way of Ireland, you get into Scotland because Scottish only means wandering Irishman. That's from the Romans. Scotland was Rome to Ireland. So you've got the Irish with black in them. You've got 1.5 million black slaves in England. And then they free their slaves in England in 1743. They emancipate them, but none of them leave the country. So you get a lot of the Africans intermixing with the Englishmen during this time period.
Mm-hmm.
So they are coming over to America to settle the place. So you've got Irish coming over, Scottish coming over, and you've got your good old, jolly old Englishmen coming over. And they've got a lot of African genes in them. So the founding fathers knew this. So they were very touchy about the ancestry. There's another thing, too. See, William the Conqueror and his boys conquered England in 1066. Mm-hmm. And for the next 200, 300 years, there was a big thing between being a Norman, which was what they were, and being a Saxon, which is what everybody else was. To be a Saxon was to be effectively a slave. So when they start colonizing America 300 years later, 400 years later, what happens is it's the Saxon lords, not the Saxon lords, it's the Norman lords who are the aristocracy who set it up. And then they populate the colonies with Saxons. And by the way, the whole thing about the plantation started in Ireland when the English crown gave certain of the English nobility the right to set up plantations in Ireland and effectively employ the Irish as slaves almost. So that's where they practiced it on. So you see what happens is there's an onus on slavery and indentured servitude because it's looked down upon, and too many of the people involved knew damn well that they were real close to that line because you got some black ancestry that was known at the time because you freed the slaves in 1743, which was before the American Revolution. you knew that you had some black in you from those Moors that came over from Spain and some of the last names that the people had at the time. So it's an interesting. We as people forget what regions are all about. So white people started forgetting about, oh yeah, you got a little bit of the tar brush in your background too.
Right. You said William the Conqueror was a Norman?
He was a Norman.
Okay.
And see, what happens is Norman means he's a Norseman or a Northman.
Okay.
He was a Viking.
Mm-hmm.
His great-grandfather was Rollo. Rollo was a big man, so big that a horse couldn't carry him.
Wow.
And he went around slaughtering and raping everything he could get a hold of.
It's like Genghis Khan.
Yeah. And the French got together and elected a guy named Hugh Capet. And that became the first of the French kings that led up to Louis XIV. But Louis XIV's ancestor, his ancestor was elected to be the French king to deal with Rollo, the Viking.
Mm-hmm.
Rollo's great-grandson is William the Conqueror. William the Conqueror was a vicious son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
They had a thing they called William's worms. And what that was is he'd have his troops fall on an English village, seize 10 men, pluck their eyes out, take red-hot nails and put their ears out, cut their tongues out, and cut off both arms and both legs so they'd have to squirm through the dirt and the villagers would have to feed them.
Wow.
And they called them Willie's worms.
Jeez. Wow.
To control the English countryside, what he did during his reign is deliberately set up some famines where 150, 200,000 English died from starvation by design.
Wow.
So these were the people that set up the colonies in America, Sir Walter Raleigh and all that bunch. And by the way, Sir Walter Raleigh decided he was going to make a fortune by importing slaves and selling them into Spanish colonies, which had it under control of the Catholic Church. So he sold bootleg slaves in the Spanish colonies and sold them in America too. They profited with this in America because nobody else would put up with it but certain colored folk from Africa. Not all Africans, just certain ones.
Do you know which tribes will put up with it? Any certain tribes of Africans?
Yeah, usually the people that were already damn near close to it anyway.
And you said, go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead, Judge.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was thinking about the Scotch-Irish. I was thinking about the fact that Rosa Parks got Scotch-Irish ancestry as well as Andrew Jackson. And, they always say Andrew Jackson might be black or may be black, or even Alexander Hamilton, who's from the Allens. A lot of people say he was black. But, you look it up on a $10 bill, he looked like a white man. And Andrew Jackson got his interest in history. But, so you tell me that a lot of people that we consider white are not really white that found this country or came to this country.
Yeah, exactly. If you get these DNA tests, some people come back where they have some deep African ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about the African ancestry that comes from everybody is from somebody that came up out of Africa.
Right.
So your race is to an extent not just what you look like outside, but what you think you are and what you identify with as a culture. There's some interesting stuff that's come to light too about why do they call it darkest Africa? Why was it so far behind the rest of the world in one sense for a long time? That seems to be because Africa got its Iron Age very early. They find sites in Africa where it looks like they got their Iron Age 8, 9, 10,000 years ago. And that's 6 to 8,000 years before the rest of the world developed the Bronze Age.
So they had a real Wakanda back then. You tell me there was a real Wakanda like so many thousands of years ago in Africa?
Yeah, but see, it had a bad problem.
Okay.
See, there's always a two-edged sword when you get to technology.
Mm-hmm.
If you develop iron technology, nobody can defeat you in battle unless they also have iron weapons. So what happens is subtropical Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, becomes possessed of a military technology that is the working of iron to make weapons out of them, such that nobody can penetrate subtropical or sub-Saharan Africa because they're badasses. This is before firearms. But what happens is if they are 8,000, 9,000 years early getting it, everything sort of stays in a stasis condition for a long time. So when the rest of the world winds up getting iron technology, they're moving on, and sub-Saharan Africa gets stagnant. So it takes 20th century to come around before they start getting back into the technological flow of the rest of the world.
But what made China the exception then? China was able to be, I guess, cut off from the world, this thing, for several dynasties.
China wasn't cut off from the world.
Oh, it wasn't?
The spice trade.
Okay.
Silks, jewels, and spices from the Far East. See, China has had a continuous civilization for a long time. And interestingly enough, you've heard of mandarins. That's the Chinese civil service. See, you weren't born into the Mandarin class. You had to pass examinations to be accepted into the Mandarin class.
It's also a Chinese language, right? Mandarin is a Chinese language?
Yeah, that's a dialect.
Oh, dialect, okay.
See, but the Mandarin class is civil service. So, you know, they have civil service from 2,000 years ago in China. You had to pass examinations to become a civil servant or a Mandarin.
Interesting. Oh. I guess what I'm saying with China, how were they able to be so insulated, like not be affected, I guess, like their culture being attacked?
They got affected.
They got affected, okay.
Yeah. Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's son. He conquered China. They built the wall before that to keep out the barbarians.
What they consider Mongolians? They call them Mongolians?
Mongols.
Mongols, okay.
Mongols were some bad boys.
Who was better? Was it the Mongols or the Vikings? Who was the...
Oh, the Mongols were much worse. They had signal communication on the battlefield. They had drum corps that did drum signaling. Each trooper had a string of 6 horses that he carried along with him, and they would ride. One horse got too tired, they'd switch to the next, then switch to the next, and then go back and recirculate. They could cover miles. They could cover distances that took World War II before armies could do that again. Also, they had these short composite bows that were extremely powerful. Took 5 years to make. And to show you what the society did, if you were a boyer, in other words, a bow maker, you got a cut of the loot just like you were a warrior, because it took you 5 years to make a bow. So every Mongol trooper had multiple bows and 400 or 500 arrows on board, you know. And I've seen a demonstration where somebody at a dead gallop can get off 6 arrows in 1 minute shooting at a target. They couldn't even do that with a rifle until the 20th century. So these dudes would just have these fast moving horse formations, and they wouldn't close and hack it out with swords. They'd just shoot everybody out of the saddle, and they would have a circle where the troopers are just going around in a circle, shooting until there's nobody standing. And see, they were smart enough to co-opt everybody else's science and technology.
Wow.
When Marco Polo went and visited China, what he was talking about was China. He was talking about Mongol-controlled China. He said it's a fearsome place. The Khan was a fearsome, ruthless, vicious man. He said, but unlike Europe, he said you could take a beautiful woman, a beautiful virgin woman, and have her stark naked with a fortune in gold on her person, and she could walk from one end of the empire to the other in absolute safety.
Wow. That's something.
Yeah, and they were religiously tolerant, and they wound up controlling everything from Egypt to India to China. They controlled most of Russia. The only reason they didn't wind up controlling all of Europe is basically the first round. Genghis Khan, whose name was Temujin, he died. And everybody retreated back to the home city, and they divided up the empire to his sons, and then they went forth. And every time one of them was chief Khan in the area would croak, they would withdraw. But couldn't anybody stop them?
That's interesting. Wow. That is.
And then even in India, the Mughals in India, that's the Mongols. Those are the Rajas. Now, that's an interesting thing. It was a real problem the English had. They controlled India, right? But they controlled India and ran it through the Rajas. And interestingly enough, in the 19th century, when the Victorian age hit and they really ruled the world, the problem they had was some of the richest Indians, the Rajas, were as rich as anybody in England. So somebody who was a Raja, he wasn't considered exactly white, but he could come in and get treated like a potentate because he was. But poor us, see, we still haven't got it. We are afraid of money. We walk around, you look at somebody, oh man, he got some money, man. That man, dude ain't all right, man. Like, hey, you got to be a real man and be broke. What the hell's wrong with you, fool? You got to be a real man and be stupid, man. Hey. See, everybody else in the world, the people that run stuff are the ones that are learned, wise, smart, strong, and warlike, right?
Yeah.
And control the money. The only thing we got, man, is we play cannibal. The only man that's got some money is the dope man. Or the pimp, he got a little lightweight ducats, So they're running poison, killing off their communities. They aren't advanced. They live. But, if the dude's smart and he's got an education, he can't be all right. He ain't no real man. We got this stupid thing in our heads. See, we glorify dysfunction. We're all about show rather than for real. It's like, for example, two acquaintances I have and I were out someplace. So we encountered some homeboys, right? Yeah, man, y'all all dressed up, man, like you come down, like you gonna act like you gonna do something, man. What if we decide to take it from you? Like, that ain't gonna happen. Man, y'all strapped? Yeah, very heavily. And everybody in here don't mind taking your life, fool. Man, bottom line is, if we took your life, they'd believe us over you. And we got a whole lot of money between us, which you don't have. So what you gonna do except act like a damn fool? So go on, take your broke ass over there, shut the F up before we do you in.
Wow.
We're just trying to impose order out here. This ain't right what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you don't like it, we can put it to the test. But you see, most of the time, well, my good brothers, the Bible says, that's the way they look at folk who have something, see. But there's another part of it, too. See, I know a lot of these billionaires, millionaires, multimillionaires from Aspen, where I used to have a place. I go up there and ski all winter. And everybody in these families has had somebody that did some penitentiary time for cutting corners to get where they are.
Right.
There are a whole lot of skeletons in closets, real ones, where people have made their bones. And when they get to drinking that Jack and they start putting you in part of the group, you start hearing about Uncle Jackson, or Uncle Jason. He had to take care of 5 or 6 people who were in the way of the family fortune. So just because you have money and a little bit of class and a lot of education doesn't mean you can't be a stone cold killer.
That makes sense. I mean, a lot of killers wear tailor-made suits. Now, they don't sag their pants, like you told me the other time.
Yeah,
they wear tailor-made suits and everything. College educated.
You ever seen a picture of, let's see, who can I think of? Lucky Luciano, when he ain't sharp, with a custom-made suit and tie on?
Yes, sir.
I ain't walking around with his shirt tailed out, looking like he ought to be pushing a shopping cart with lawn bags in it.
No, he didn't.
See, it's like the Baron who rode in with his retainers and everybody's got on armor with a battle axe, shield, spear, and sword. They are sharp. They're dressed, to the nines as far as this society says you can. When they take that armor off, these dudes are clean. They're the ones wearing the silks from the Orient, They're high fashion. We just go around looking high tacky. Looking like some sissy out of a jail. Sagged and bagged, ready to bend over and get it up the butt by whoever can take it.
What about the skinny jeans thing? I always think about that. Cats wearing skinny jeans.
Well, there have been periods over the last 60, 70 years in and out of American fashion. Somebody just like to wear muscle T-shirts, thin jeans, but these skinny jeans ain't coming from there.
Okay.
These skinny jeans are coming from that little sweetmeat jar outside of the tracks, I mean, it's their right to be sweetmeats, but hey.
Also, I noticed too, there's a lot of women like to help. It's like men that are dusty and bummy and in distress. Women like to help those guys. I see a lot of women be with these guys helping kids. Is that a new phenomenon?
Well, women like masculinity, but you see, with us, we tend to go for appearances rather than reality. Part of being masculine is, do you uphold the code? Masculinity is all about the code. Damn what you look like. You can be a little thin dude, but if shit hits the fan, dude can be right there.
Right.
You know, basically it's like if everything went down, can this dude, this dude got your back?
Yeah.
You know, he may not be as big as you, but is he smart enough to be part of the posse? You know, you might be able to whip him, but then figure out, hey, he needs to be leading this damn thing, and I need to watch his back. I need to be his right-hand man. So I can't think it through like he can, but hey, he's got heart. He'll fight.
Right.
Nobody's going to run him off, so we do better with his brain running stuff than my brawn, so let me use my brawn to back up his brain.
But ain't that how the mob works? The person who lived the longest is the earner. The hitters normally get killed, but the earners know how to make money and create opportunity for the game. They can survive for a long time. Look at Meyer Lansky and some other people, for example.
Yeah, Meyer Lansky. There it is. But that's what Lucky Luciano did. He died. He didn't die of violence. He died of old age, ill health.
Right. But he enjoyed himself, didn't he?
Well, he wound up helping the war effort greatly.
Right. And
he said, okay, get up out of Dodge City. You're not a citizen, so you're getting deported back to Sicily,
And it was a woman, it was a black woman that brought him down, not Thomas Dewey. It was a lawyer named Eunice Carter that worked for Thomas Dewey that brought him down, a black woman.
Maybe.
I mean, she actually started interviewing the prostitutes. That's how she found out that he was involved in, prostitution. And she took it to Thomas Dewey. It was Eunice Carter. It was a black woman that did that.
Yeah, well, see, Lucky Luciano messed himself up. His lawyers, from the legal side, we study these things as trial lawyers. His lawyers tried to get him to keep his mouth shut. Do not take the stand. They don't have a case on you. But see, his ego got involved, so he said, I want everybody to know I ain't like that. Don't take the stand. But he did, and the more he testified, the worse it got. He did that to himself because until he took the stand, he was walking.
Well, actually, this then, what about Al Capone? I heard that he was railroaded, that they legally screwed him over by doing illegal stuff.
Tax. Nobody paid attention to tax.
But I'm talking how the way they changed the jury on him. I'm telling you, some of the stuff they did, it was unethical.
Well, there's a famous thing where he had bought off a jury. The judge was not a crooked judge, so he just exchanged the jury before the trial.
But was his jail sentence, was it fair in comparison with income tax evasion? Why they give him such a long sentence? Because they never got for any murders or anything like that.
Well, yeah, but look at Wesley Snipes. He got 3 years on the 3 misdemeanor counts of failure to file a complete set of returns. I was present at the sentencing hearing, and IRS has showed up with a check for him for $250,000 where he overpaid his taxes.
Wow.
Now, he gets 3 years, but yet you turn to Geithner, Obama's Treasury Secretary, 6 months before he becomes the Treasury Secretary. He pled guilty to defrauding the government out of $42 million in taxes, and he gets 6 months suspended and a $42,000 fine. See the difference?
Yes, sir.
It's like the coercive powers of the government using its criminal law when it chooses to do so that way.
So they got to break their own laws to catch somebody in the act. Well, they entrapping people, it seems like.
Well, see, federal law is really wicked. It's what they've got on the U.S. Supreme Court or have had for almost the last 50 years has not been a group of justices who throughout their legal career dealt with ordinary people on the other side of their desk. So they tend to have lost track of how what they do affects ordinary people.
Mm.
Like the main problem, for example, with Trump's latest nominee is not so much Roe v. Wade, which they're screeching about. It's the Fourth Amendment, the right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, from the decisions he's written, which are pretty clear, looks like he read 1984 when he was a child, and he's been idolizing Big Brother ever since.
Mm.